started here, but Dan, if you want to kick us off.
Why don't you join us? And then if the counselor comes, and if the counselor comes, you can swap places with her. But welcome everybody. This is our 2-year data wrap-up of automated speed enforcement cameras, and over the last 2 years, we've seen dramatic reductions in speed and in the number of speeders at the 20 locations where we have cameras. And we want to just have the conversation today about how important that is. All of these cameras were put in critical locations. Valerie Hermanson can speak more to this in a second, about where the most dangerous intersections and most dangerous streets are in Albuquerque. And we love to see drivers slowing down, and we're realizing that new technology like these automated speed enforcement cameras is really making a huge difference. So we have data, you can see it on the boards, you can see the change in speed is certainly dramatic on a lot of these, but at every single camera we've seen at least a 42% reduction in speed, in the number of speeders at every camera. It's amazing. So we'll turn it over first to Mayor Tim Keller, who will kick us off with some data.
Sure. So I think, first and foremost, we decided 2 years ago to take a step that at the time seemed like a major risk and would be very unpopular. And it was to have speed enforcement cameras. And that was something that, our city had never really had. We had the red light things, which we explained were not that, so that's different. But for us, it was a step taken out of necessity, because speeding was so bad all over the city from basically all demographics that there was no way we could enforce our way with officers out of that challenge. And so this has been one of the situations where we are seeing a dramatic impact from this. And we really appreciate that the county is also joining us and filling in some of the gaps outside city limits. And so what we have seen is that in general, I think the most important thing to note is, depending on the camera, we've seen between a 42% and an 89% decrease of speeding by 10 miles an hour. That is extremely important. And remember that every mile per hour reduction is a 17% reduction in fatal crashes. And so if you do that math, somehow it's, so you could probably just leave that one down or something. Anyway, so look, we know that the only way to continue to do this is by using technology, right? We certainly do not have enough officers to be on every street corner, and our officers very much appreciate not having to do this work, but also it's very thorough, it's very fast, it's automatic, and has resulted in 223,000 tickets. Now, remember that you've got to be, we don't share the exact number, but it's basically you got to be going 10 miles over the speed limit. So these are people who are going too fast across the board. And we have 20 cameras around the city, and we're going to be doubling that amount this winter. And so for us, the important thing is Albuquerque is finally slowing down. Now we understand it's only where these cameras are, but by the time we get the next 40 out, you're going to see that difference and feel that difference all over the city and out in the county with their cameras too. So for us, it's part of a broader approach using technology to fight crime. It's smarter, it's faster, and it frees up our officers to take violent crime calls. So we pair this with our license plate readers and with the thousands of police cameras that we're putting up all over the city, and with our gunshot detection, all of which we're also doubling this winter. Now, for us too, I want to make sure that some of these cameras, almost all of them, are in places that had the highest speeding. So we're also starting where they're needed the most. And I've been wonderfully surprised. One of the number one requests I get from people is they want a speeding camera on their street. And so it just shows that they're working, right? That was the opposite of what we thought was going to happen, is people didn't like these. But I think we've acknowledged this is about safety, and people need to go to the speed limit. We also know that on lead, amazingly, people are actually literally going the speed limit. And that's the first time that's happened, I think, ever in the history of lead. I mean, I remember when it was a full 3 lanes and it was really bad. And then we narrowed it, and it's gotten a little better over time. But now people are finally going the speed limit on lead. So for us too, the money that we generate from this, we made sure we were very careful. Number one, want to remind folks that they can do public service. You don't always have to pay a fine. And we also know that The funds that we get from this, we're going to plow back into what we call Vision Zero. What is this term that we should really have zero pedestrian fatalities in our community? And we're here at this location because of the demonstration of those funds, what they're used for. The entire street redesign of Louisiana from the base over to Zuni is a result and paid for by Vision Zero and designed by Vision Zero to make the street safer so that we don't need speed cameras on it and that we make sure pedestrians are safe. So you see an awesome new bike lane and you see a street that's hopefully going to work much better in conjunction with the neighborhood and the schools around it. So with more on this, the sort of architect of all things Vision Zero at the city, our person in charge of Vision Zero, Valerie Hermanson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to kind of dial it back a little bit and just remind everybody that safe speeds, as the reason we're here today, are a core principle of our Vision Zero traffic safety work, since we know from comprehensive data that humans are less likely to survive high-speed crashes. The faster a driver goes, the more likely a crash is to occur, and the more serious the consequences. And that's not only true for people inside of a vehicle, but it's especially true for more vulnerable roadway users, such as people walking or biking that's hit by a person driving a speeding car. Higher speeds make crashes more likely because drivers have less time to react and to respond, and they also need more distance to stop or slow down. And that's a big reason why this automated speed enforcement program is a core pillar to our traffic safety work. This program launched in April 2022 with 3 automated speed enforcement cameras, or as I also like to refer to them as speed safety cameras. And throughout the last 2 years, we've incrementally added additional cameras, as the mayor mentioned, on high crash locations and also where the community has desired them. Today we have 20 throughout our community. We started this program by issuing warnings, and then we shifted to issuing a mix of warnings and citations. And by September 2022, we began by only issuing citations. And to date, we've issued over 223 citations. Our automated speed enforcement program uses a data-driven approach, not only to identify potential camera locations, but to assess the data, as you can see on these boards and why we're here today. With this 2-year data review, we've seen changes in driver behavior. Between April 2022 and May 2024, all 20 cameras saw between a 42 and an 89.2 decrease in drivers exceeding the posted speed limit by 10 plus miles per hour. All 20 cameras saw between a 0.3 and an 8.3 mile per hour decrease in average driver speed. 19 cameras saw top driver speeds over 100 miles an hour, with one camera's top speed at 86 miles per hour. We continue to learn from this program and to hold people accountable. We updated the ASC ordinance last year to include booting violators with multiple ASC fines in default. Our program also prioritizes equity, and we're one of a few programs in the country where people can complete community service instead of paying that fine. The mayor mentioned that as well. And to date, we've seen over 11,000 hours of community service completed. Not only did our data support it, but we also heard from our communities that speeding on state roads through the city of Albuquerque was a top concern. We're talking about roadways such as Coors, Paseo del Norte. And a big thank you to the New Mexico Department of Transportation, also known as NMDOT. We entered into an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, in which they allowed the city to place speed safety cameras on roadways such as Coors and Paseo, and those are our most recent cameras. This program is a force multiplier, and I think it shows that we can have a lot of meaningful change with the resources that we have. I'd like to close by tying our speed safety camera program back to our Vision Zero traffic safety efforts. Our program follows national best practices and prioritizes safe speeds and streets strategies to work towards zero traffic deaths and serious injuries. And we know we can encourage and influence better driver behavior with street design. And so that's why that's another core pillar to our Vision Zero work, in addition to speed safety cameras. And you know, we're here off Louisiana Boulevard, where this great traffic safety project is under construction. It's implementing many layers of proven safety countermeasures, and it's not only going to make it safer for people walking, it's also going to make it safer for people bicycling and also people driving. The next phase of this project is going to include 3 mid-block crossings with pedestrian hybrid beacons, and that project's going to be made possible because of this speed safety camera program. We're excited by the progress so far, and we look forward to continuing this important work and creating safer streets for our families and our communities. I'd like to turn it over to the deputy. Oops, excuse me.
Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Deputy Chief.
Absolutely. I'll just talk a little bit about how these cameras are assisting our department. I think we've heard it several times today, force multiplier, and that's really what it's doing for our department. Technology has been so huge overall. Mayor mentioned ShotSpotter, the ALPRs, and different cameras that we have. But Commander Martinez is here from the traffic unit, and talking with him, we know what areas of town or what streets and intersections have the highest traffic fatalities, whether it be pedestrian or vehicle involved, and where speeding is happening. And one thing that their team does as well is they look at these intersections and follow up. So if we know that individuals are speeding in an area, it's slowing down for a camera and then continuing to speed up again, they conduct operations. They know where that's happening. Again, just the force multiplier of the citations being issued with these cameras helps our department so that our traffic unit can focus on other areas in town. As far as field services, where I cover the officers that I have, it allows them to respond to calls for service, like the mayor said, and to respond to violent crimes and crimes in progress and do more proactive work. And so that's very beneficial to us as well. Also looking at the data, again, it helps us to be able to take that information in and know where we should be focusing our efforts. And again, just technology overall has been super beneficial for our department, and we thank you.
Can you get your first and last name?
Yes, it's Cecily Barker. It's Cecily, and last name is Barker.
And I'm just going to step in here. We know we threw a lot of data at everybody today, and we wanted to have a different format and more of a conversation about what these cameras mean, how they work, how we've implemented them, what our future plans are. So we wanted to have a little bit more casual conversation than we usually do in these kinds of things. So if you guys wanted to start with question and answer now, I think it'd be great.
I got a question. In neighboring cities like Rio Rancho, I see a lot of speed enforcement. I was just wondering how much data was looked at with neighboring cities in the state and that kind of thing.
Valerie?
So did Rio Rancho use a data-driven process for their cameras? Or?
Well, I was just asking if when you're researching this, if you looked at neighboring cities.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we looked at peer cities to understand what the best practices are and if there's any lessons learned. I think places like New York City have had speed safety cameras since the 80s. So there's other places that have had these cameras and have a lot of lessons learned, and we were able to incorporate that into our program. I think equity is a priority for the city of Albuquerque, and that's also why we incorporated that community service component. So now we're leading the way as a best practice with that, which is interesting, and we're starting to see that pop up in other peer city programs.
For streets like Louisiana and others that get redesigned to become safer, using some of these funds, are there plans to eventually get rid of some of these speed cams in the future? Because that was one thing that somebody mentioned, that the hope is to make these streets overall safer, so that speed cams might not be that necessary. Would there be plans to get rid of those?
Certainly one day that's the goal. I think just having been born and raised here and knowing our town, that would be awesome if we get there one day. I think we have a long ways to go. And so we also know that, we're looking at a similar street setup actually downtown on Central. So if we keep doing that, we also want to sort of mitigate where there are speeding problems. And that's really going to help us too. So that allows us to move cameras. So I think in the short term, expect us to move cameras to where they're needed.
Speaking of that, what is the process for selecting locations for where the cameras are going to be and when to move them and that sort of stuff?
It's basically data driven, but
yeah.
Valerie, you can
That's a great
elaborate
question.
on that.
Yeah, so we use what's called our High Fatal and Injury Network, also lovingly referred to as the HFIN. We love our acronyms in transportation. And what that does is it takes 5 years of crash data to see where recurring fatal and serious injury crashes are happening. So that's one data point. Another data point we call the Vulnerability Index, also known as an Equity Index. And what that is 8 indicators likely to impact a person's transportation vulnerability. And that's important because we want to make sure that we're not overburdening one community over another, and that we're widely distributing these cameras where they're needed. We look at schools. We consider where council districts are. We look at APD has a wealth of data as well that we use. There's a lot of layers of data into determining where locations are appropriate.
And if anybody wants me to send them a link to that high-fin map, let me know and I can send you a link to that map.
So is all the money coming from the cameras, is it all in this Louisiana project?
No, that's a great question here. I actually have a list of projects we've been able to fund. So as we mentioned, funds generated through this program pay for the program, and then remaining funds are split, and half is required to go to the state, and then we can retain funds, as the mayor mentioned, for Vision Zero traffic safety efforts. And so funds generated through this program have supplemented the construction for the Uptown Louisiana Safety Improvement Project. That's removing some slip lanes, it's adding a mid-block crossing. Funds from this program help to supplement that. It's helping to supplement phase 2 of our Louisiana Boulevard traffic safety improvement project. We have another project that just kicked off at 4th and Lomas that's going to be implementing some traffic safety improvements. We also have another project, and this one will probably be high on our radar, high priority, is East Central. We're looking at implementing a road diet between Wantabo and Louisiana, and we're going to be adding mid-block crossings with pedestrian hybrid beacons to make it easier for people to cross the street. So that's currently in design, and that project is made possible through funds of this program.
My question is, speed cameras have the potential to reduce traffic stops, and in traffic stops, people like Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, was arrested, as well as Ted Bundy, a notorious serial killer. I was wondering, is it a concern for the city that potential criminals could be skating by without as many traffic stops?
I think it's important to note that we're still conducting traffic stops. So even though at these specific locations you might not see an officer, we're still conducting traffic stops, issuing citations, and making contact with the public. One of the things as well is if we have an individual who is continually speeding in that area and not paying fines, we know what time they're out there, and we've had officers go out and issue a citation in person. So cameras are taking that away from us, but I think it's really important again just to note that we're still out there making traffic stops. The traffic unit is ahead of our citations last year, so we're still out there and our presence is there. So
All right, well, if that's all the questions we have today, I know there's a couple of you. I will get back to you on email with a couple of different things. But thank you very much for being here. Thank you guys for coming. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I can get you with Valerie, and we can answer all the detailed questions about the future of the speed camera program. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.